The book we're going to be talking about today is The New Great Depression by James Rickards. Rickards is a lawyer, economist, investment banker, and has written many books about major economic issues in the past. The book The New Great Depression discusses why Rickards thinks we are in another economic depression, how the government can buy gold to get out of this economic depression, and what individual investors can do to be successful in this depression. In this talk, we will go over the points that Rickards makes about why we're in a depression, look at an alternative solution for the American government to get out of the depression by buying cryptocurrency, and then ending with a summary of optimal portfolio allocation for investors to win in a depression. First, it is important to understand what an economic depression is. Rickards states that there is not a clear definition of what a depression is from top economists. Generally, economists view depression as 5 or more quarters of economic decline, or in other words, a long recession. However, during the years of the Long Depression and Great Depression, there were periods of economic recovery, but they are still classified as depressions. Rickards' definition of a depression is as follows: depressed growth relative to trend growth. An example of this would be an economy that is capable of 3% growth, yet grows at 2% for an extended period. The COVID-19 pandemic has been around for just over a year, so how can Rickards say we're in depression without years of depressed growth to back up his statement? Rickards points to 3 reasons. The first is the loss of 60 million jobs in America in 6 months. It is true that many people will regain work rather quickly, but there will still be a large number of people still unemployed from the pandemic for years to come. Rickards predicts that it will take at least 3 years for everyone who was laid off during the pandemic to find new work. The second point regarding why we are in a depression relates to the loss of jobs just stated. People were laid off because the businesses they worked for weren't seeing customers. It is estimated that 90% of New York City's bars and restaurants were unable to pay their August rent. This trend is consistent across most small businesses in the United States. The lost output of small businesses means lost revenue and lost income for individuals, but it also means lost sales taxes and lost income taxes for local and federal governments. The third and most important reason why Rickards states we are in a depression is the monetary policy response from the Fed in the form of guarantees, money printing, and surging liquidity where needed. The process of money printing is problematic as it creates a liquidity trap and produces a deflationary spiral. Printing money results in an increase in the debt to GDP ratio for the Fed. This has already been seen as the Fed increased its balance sheet from $4.2 trillion to $7.2 trillion in 2020. Printing money increases the debt to GDP ratio for the Fed while reducing citizens' confidence and causes inflation. Loss of confidence and inflation leads citizens to save more and spend less. The duality of a sustained increase in savings and less spending causes deflation in the dollar as the cost of goods decreases. Deflation causes consumers to save even more and spend even less. This lowers GDP because there's less production, and then we are back to the start of the Fed printing more money. This goes around and around in what is called a liquidity trap or deflationary spiral. Deflation is really problematic as it increases the real value of the debt that the Fed has. The only way for debt to disappear is with inflation. If inflation is higher than interest rates, then over time the debt just melts away. For example, if inflation is at 4% and interest is at 2%, the real burden of debt will halve in 30 years. Rickards states that the only way to stop deflation is to devalue the dollar. He suggests that the United States should go buy gold at increasing prices. By doing so, the dollar price of gold would rise, which effectively devalues the dollar. If you devalue the dollar, the price of gold goes up, and so does everything else. You need to break the back of deflation by achieving inflation. This has been done twice historically, once successfully by Franklin D. Roosevelt in 1933, and once unsuccessfully by Richard Nixon in 1971. This is where I disagree with Rickards. A 21st century depression requires a 21st century solution. I think the solution to stopping deflation is through the purchase of Bitcoin. Bitcoin, or cryptocurrency, seems to be all the fuss these days, and there are many who are skeptical about it. However, I think there are 2 reasons why Bitcoin is as safe as gold. The technology that makes up Bitcoin, called blockchain, is extremely secure. Essentially, any information put into the blockchain is unchangeable. This means that owning Bitcoin is the same as having gold in a safe. Once it's yours, it can't be stolen because the blockchain backing it is impossible to hack. Second, and most importantly, is the fact that there's a limited number of Bitcoins that can ever be mined. This limit is 21 million Bitcoin. This causes Bitcoin to act in a similar manner as gold, but gold continues to be mined and no one knows what the true limit of gold is. There are plenty of other reasons that have been researched and published about the advantages of Bitcoin, but those go beyond the scope of this talk. Now that we know Bitcoin is as secure, if not more secure than gold, the process is the same as Rickards laid out. The US Fed should buy Bitcoin at increasing price levels. This would devalue the American dollar and produce inflation. As discussed before, inflation with interest reduces debt for the Fed. Lower debt increases confidence in spending from consumers, which in turn increases GDP. Rickards ends the book by offering advice on the optimal investment portfolio for individuals to win in a depression. The optimal investment strategy is as follows: 30% of investable assets in cash, 10% in gold, 20% in residential real estate, 20% in treasury notes, 10% in equities, and 10% in alternatives. Based on the recommendation of the US Fed buying Bitcoin instead of gold, the optimal investment portfolio would look the exact same, with the exception of 10% in Bitcoin instead of gold. I would like to end this talk by saying I don't think the US Fed will be buying Bitcoin anytime soon. There is still too much perceived uncertainties around Bitcoin, and the backlash from such a move would not be good for a country already going through so much unrest. However, I think the logic behind using Bitcoin to deflate debt and move the US economy out of a depression is sound. I also think the use of Bitcoin is a much better solution than gold. Thank you.